I would now like to introduce our speaker, Mary Jennings. She is a graduate of the Moore College of Art and Design in Philadelphia, and she currently works as a professional artist and art instructor at places like the Arlington Artists Alliance, the National Sporting Library and Museum, and the Salamander Resort and Spa. She also has private workshop clients who include the Kennedy Center and several businesses. She earned her certification as an Extension Master Gardener in 2013 and has also since become a Master Naturalist and a Level 1 Sommelier. Mary, I'm going to take it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. It's a pleasure to be here among you all, and such an honor to be sort of asked to teach a subject that I am very passionate about, art, but also being able to combine it with my other passion, which would be gardening, more nature in general. I'm thrilled to be here and really excited to lead you all through something that I am becoming very engaged with, especially teaching others, because I think it has such a huge value. So let's get into the process of this program, but I do want to ask you to do one thing before we start. If you happen to have a piece of paper and pen, it doesn't have to be a whole piece of paper, but just a piece of paper and pen nearby, keep something nearby because later on I might be asking you to do a little something. So just a little heads up. Today, in our topic on the art of garden journaling, we will be asking ourselves why? Why do we need to garden journal? And is it just about the art? Or is there more to it than just garden journaling with beautiful artworks in it? Is it more than just a sketchbook? And then basically, I'll also be covering how to sustain a practice of garden journaling throughout the year. And mostly the study occurs anywhere and anytime. And then what does this all lead up to? Well, I have some application of skills at the very end that I get hopefully you jazzed about and excited to begin your own garden journal process. Now, I realize that we probably have some very qualified artists in the group today, and that's wonderful. And also very qualified garden journal artists in the group today. And I hope to be able to really speak to every range of skill level and interest. And I hope you leave with something that you didn't have before. That's my goal. So let's get into why garden journal. So I have my personal reasons, which I won't spend the entire presentation telling you, but I really would like to let you know that part of my reason is that I was never really a garden, but my older sister, she older than me by 9 years, she lived on the very steep slopes in the mountains in Oregon, not a very fertile or proper place for a garden. But when she described to me over the phone how she would garden, I was just amazed at how she approached her garden like an artist, a true artist. So at that point, I was like thinking, oh, I'm the artist in the family. She's the gardener, but really, that is her art. So she just really described how she needed verticals over here. So she planted string beans and how she approached it. But unfortunately, she passed away years ago, 25 years ago, and I don't have any records of her beautiful garden to cherish. So I think that one of my personal reasons for doing garden journals is actually that it's a good way to keep records for those who love what you love and those that would also glean maybe some secrets about the great successes that you have in the garden. So, my reasons as an artist for garden journaling is basically the same as the reason I teach others. And I'm going to be teaching you why you should garden journal. So, part of my why as an artist is obviously I discuss the other gardeners in my life. And then my other thing is my desire to impact others through teaching them more about nature, but using my art as a tool for that. And we basically are doing that today. So after I became Extension Master Gardener in 2013, I thought that I kept my art and my gardening kind of in separate worlds, which is obviously not going to work out. So I just use in my own capacity ways to communicate to others lessons that need to be learned. So I actually participated in a sketchbook project that's now part of the Brooklyn Art Library. And I created a sketchbook illustrating invasives around the world. So I was educating others about invasives through the sketchbook. And I also did an art show on, I called it Empathetic by Nature. So that was basically artwork based on what nature teaches us about empathy. In other words, understanding before being understood. And then it wasn't until I became a master naturalist in Arlington that I discovered that there was actually this thing called nature journaling. I never knew this existed. I'd just been doing this. What was wonderful about that process is that it really showed to me that there was the marriage between nature and art, and being a gardener and an artist, and also the science and the art. As I teach anyone anything, I also believe that no matter what your skill level is, we are all artists. And we will move forward and figure that out. So let's take a little step backwards to a little bit of the history of garden journaling, and we're going to look towards the Middle Ages, where much of the vineyard land in Burgundy was owned by the Catholic Church's Benedictine and then the Cistercian monasteries. Well, these monks from these monasteries, from the abbey of the Citeaux at the end of the 11th century, well, they painstakingly studied the vineyards, and they identified often tiny superior parcels that produced wines of distinct character. And these vineyard plots would eventually become many of Burgundy's most prestigious appellations. So the appellations are basically the properties that produce these wines, and the product from these appellations were outstanding. So it actually has their process of record keeping through visuals. As you can see, they talk about the binding of the vines, the planting of the crops, the harvesting, the winemaking, just really excellent record keeping that now produces Burgundy's superior wines that represent their unique terroir. So the terroir is basically what the sense of place is. So we aren't the first to be doing this from this presentation. So again, the marriage between art and science is sort of captured here. The fairest thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science. A quote by Albert Einstein. And it leads into why you should garden journal. This is kind of the first of this kind of class that we've taught through this program of Extension Master Gardeners as far as art, at least in these videoed programs. Is art science? Of course. Yes, yes. Is it a challenge or an opportunity? It's both, actually. So what I love about the process of nature journaling is it ignites the opportunity for intentional curiosity. The study itself is something that we as artists do often, but in the form of a garden journal, you're actually taking notation more than the visual aspects of what you're looking at. So it is also through what you are spending time with, you're telling your brain this is important. So you're turning your awareness into love and action. So there's a practical side to garden journaling, and that is why we're learning this today. Obviously, during these colder months, it's one way to keep yourself very engaged with your favorite place on earth, your garden, but it also is an opportunity for you to engage in site mapping, perhaps some garden design with planning where your next plot should go, or where you should plant something, or where something might have better success in the coming months as the weather warms up. Even if you don't garden as much, or if you're in an urban setting and don't have as much property to garden with, you can still have a garden journal, because there are actual mental health benefits to garden journaling, because it gives you an opportunity to celebrate and experience the joy in being creative. and also just having a better understanding for something that you have a curiosity about. And then for those who are waiting for the weather to warm up, although today it is warm, but the real official gardening season, it'll give you a better understanding of where maybe a future project will best be. So that love can be defined as sustained and compassionate action. And this is a quote by John Muir Laws. He is the author and fantastic teacher of drawing and journaling. He's got a book that is cited in your resource page, a book that he teaches very detailed instructions throughout the entire book on drawing birds, on drawing nature. It's more of a nature than a garden journaling guide, but either way, it's really wonderful to see his insight into how this process can direct our attention to something that needs our action. So, the benefits to nature journaling, whether you're doing it in your own backyard or you're doing it in just observation of other gardens. If you don't have your own garden, we have several demonstration gardens that are part of the Master Gardeners demo gardens, and they are fantastic. And you can actually just test out your garden journaling skills in those locations. But they also have some real applications, and one of them would be part of citizen science, even in your own backyard, which Doug Talamy says can be a national park of sorts. So you can, in your own backyard, you can begin making observations about weather conditions, general habitat that you see roll through, any opportunity for citizen science, flood, rainfall levels, that sort of thing. It's a great opportunity. And then, of course, if you take several notes, you can begin to see patterns in your garden and begin to help make adjustments, that things that need to be corrected. And of course, that would result in the real goal for us all, the right plant in the right place. So this is a great time for a break and questions. Colleen, if there's anything that people have questions about, I'd love to answer.
So far, no questions, Mary, so we can keep going.
Fantastic. All right,
Okay.
great. I'll just say this is a photograph. If anybody's like, what on earth is that? That's my attempt at gardening in my own little tiny way. And of course, I had to make it more visual than functional, but that's a palette that I used as a lettuce garden. And it worked because then the rabbits couldn't eat it. Anyway, there's that little tidbit of fun. So the next part is on to how to garden journal, the science and the art. This is not the only way to go about creating either a nature journal or a garden journal. It is my approach. As I mentioned, I'm an artist first, then I'm a gardener, and then I'm a teacher. So this is sort of how I've really had great luck with igniting people's interest in this process. So, a little bit about the forms of journaling. So, we have a couple things. So, there are field notes, which are basically just notes that you're taking on the fly. Like if you're hiking, for example, or if you're touring a garden, you don't have to have all your supplies and sit down for hours and complete the whole process of all of your observations. You can have a field note book. And this is actually an example of a field notebook that is really sturdy. It's specifically designed for harsh conditions. It is the Right in the Rain all weather universal notebook. And personally, the small size is wonderful, but I also do take something as small as this when I'm doing field notes. This is not waterproof, but I'll go into more detail about this later. But the field notes are basically supposed to be your rough outlines, your observations that you really can't organize and formulate or render in detail, but they are your really on the go notes. And then nature journals are not much different from garden journals, honestly. Nature journals obviously encompass so much more than just information about a specific location or a garden of sorts. It's more trees, things that are in nature. That's pretty obvious. And then we have garden journals. So most of what's covered in if you're ever wondering like, oh, but this book is about nature journaling, not about garden journaling specific, it's pretty much the same. It's, your intention, you're the creator of this, so you have the ability to formulate the information. So the best part about creating anything is the study. I teach people and I often tell them, I'm teaching you how to see, not necessarily how to render something perfectly, but an artist's skill really lies in how they see, either in their mind's eye or in their actual lens. So, similar to that is developing an intentional curiosity. So, actually, John Laws states that there are some essential practices when you are beginning your study. And that is whatever you are focusing on, to actually ask yourself a few questions over and over again. It's essential, it's the foundation. And those questions are stated here: I wonder, I notice, it reminds me of, and then most importantly, actually, is sort of reflecting on the process. So I share these two images on the slide with you. These are not field notes. These are not nature journals. These are not garden journals. These are actually works of art, but they do share a similar sort of beginning in that obviously they have nature as an inspiration. And I can speak personally to the image on the right with the single leaf. That is a leaf that I saw on the ground and had some intentional curiosity. I picked it up and I was like, I wonder, it was like a piece of lace. And I was like, I wonder how this happened. And then I just noticed that it was completely see-through and it was beautiful. So I stuck it on this telephone pole and I just loved the contrast. And then I actually had a moment, and I wasn't taking any notes, it was just ponderings. And then I noticed that it reminded me of me sometimes at the end of winter, that I'd sometimes feel like I've been used all up, but then there's actual beauty that still exists in the using all up. In this particular case, this was in 2020 when I found this leaf, and it just gave me great hope that things that kind of seem like they've just been sort of closed off or shut down or isolated or maybe spent still can be absolutely beautiful and function. So that is a work of art, and the work of art above it is a pastel painting by an artist that actually rendered these leaves in great detail, but it was in memory of his parents. So using nature as an informer, but also as a muse is really quite helpful. But without the help of taking notes, making studies, you really do miss an opportunity to not just make a garden journal, but to make art in the future. So, again, part of the study is to, yes, ask those questions, but then it's also to think about, how do I want to present this information? So on the left on this slide, I have taken an image this is a wonderful thing to take something, it says it's 12 pictures of the sun each month, same place, same time. And I just looked at this and I said, this is fantastic the way this is laid out. The color changes throughout the year. So I was asking myself, those questions. I wonder where the sun is moving. Is it moving to the north and to the south? Where is it coming? And then I was like, I noticed that the trees don't have any leaves. Hmm. And I noticed that the grass looked rather green. And I noticed that the sun did move, but yet it didn't look like it was the change of seasons. So this image, although the layout looked amazing, it left me with a lot of questions. But upon further study, then I began to think it was an AI image, that was something that was not real. But it's actually an image that was taken in Italy. So the position of the sun is different than what I'm familiar with. And it also, the tree is actually just a tree that has been damaged by fire. So it will not look like it has leaves. But the process of these questions actually has made me more intrigued with this object. So this is a great way to lay out something that you can make a journal in the future. Just if you did the same thing, if you sat in the same place, same, you know, time each month, what can you notice in that same place? And it can be done inside as well as outside through a window. But I love the layout, and the colors are extremely important to this. So the layout, where the clouds are, what the weather looks like. But I will say that this is a fantastic opportunity for a color study of how the different seasons look. So another part of the study, obviously you've got the potential for adoring what you're looking at and inclining your intention towards it. But you can also have the opportunity to lay those observations out in a very unique way. And that is very fun. And that is the part that I struggled with at first when I was learning how to nature journal, because I was like, well, how do I organize this information? I didn't just want to draw random things. I wanted to have it make sense. I wanted to have it have some flow. And that is why I'm sort of showing you a little bit about what I like to teach when I teach journaling, opportunities for different ways for you to organize your information. So this is from a class that I taught at the Workhouse Arts Center, and this is nature journaling, but it applies. So you can oftentimes organize your journal relating to color studies, which is what was done on the far right. The student took samples from outside and then did a basic color study, as you can see, with her watercolors for each object, whether it be a leaf or any of those things. So very interesting. There were a lot of invasives to take samples of, in case you're wondering why we're taking particular interest in those samples. But the color study is beautiful. And then the second image to the left is sharing how you can do blocks of information that share different phases of information that you've gathered. So there's wonderful opportunities for you to organize your information in various ways. And there's no saying that you have to draw. You can use photographs, you can to cut and paste if that's what you have. You can do color studies, obviously, and you can even do perhaps collage, maybe from seed packet journals or something like that. So you don't always have to have information that you're drawn. This is your book, by the way. This is your journal. This isn't anything that's going to be published for wide consumption. So the main important part is to not just leave a page blank, because that's not helpful at all. So whatever you can do to organize your information and make it as frictionless as possible is what's going to result in the better. And it doesn't also have to be perfection. It can be as general and sort of rough as you want it to be. So I do have some great tips for laying out your page and translating your information. And that is to let the information guide the structure. So in cases where, you might want to do blocks of information and then lay the information in, I would actually recommend writing the information and then laying the shapes around the information. And then I would also say that, like the slide with the sky, that person obviously set out to do exactly what they did the first photograph that they took. They said, I'm going to take a photograph every month, same day, every month, the first of the month or whatever. And I'm going to actually show an illustration of what this is going to look. How am I going to lay that out? So let the information that you're trying to capture guide the structure of the page, the structure of the booklet, the structure of the section of the journal. It doesn't have to be from left to right. It doesn't have to be from first page to last page. It's your book. You can lay it out any way you want. And then taking inspiration from the information and the purpose, as you can see, sort of can guide color choices that are made, can guide maybe illustrations that you want to add. This is an example on the far right where I did another drawing and I just added it to the actual sketchbook later. It was something I did later. So organizing your information, but honestly, the information that you are trying to capture should come before the actual structure of the page. And then you have your materials. Now, this is where you can go nuts. That it's so fun to have all these materials, but I'm telling you now, keep it simple. I've sometimes just have a brown bag that I happen to have from lunch, and I will use a ballpoint pen and journal. And you can always cut and paste your piece of sketch onto a more official journal later, but you want to keep it as simple as possible. So paper, pencil, pen. The pen is actually really great because it's pretty much everyone has a pen, but the pencil works really well on those field journals or when the paper's wet. So pencils are kind of really old school, but really good to have. And then, of course, you can go with all the bells and whistles and use colored pencils. There are things that are called wash pencils, and those are basically colored pencils that have watercolor or water soluble pigment in them. So you can color with them like a colored pencil, but you apply water and you can turn them into a watercolor. This is actually this up here, this blue tipped pen is a watercolor. It holds water. So it's a watercolor pen. So it's something you can keep in a bag and it's got water stored in the chamber and you can use it like a brush with water included. This particular pen is very fun because this is just a regular office pen, a felt tip office pen, but it is actually water soluble, so you can make ink washes with it. And then if you wanted to use a permanent pen is great because whatever watercolor you do on top of that permanent pen will not bleed. These were done with permanent pens, so then I could apply watercolor and that sort of thing and they wouldn't bleed. So that is materials. Now, the next slide is kind of fun because it's a video that I'll present to you, and I'll just give you a little backdrop for that video. The video is of me testing various materials out for a kit that I provide, and these are instructions that come with the kit. So the kit is loaded with watercolored pencils, colored pencils, drawing pencils, a wash pencil, paint brushes, and that sort of thing. And then I'm teaching also in this 7-minute video, so buckle up. It's a 7-minute video, but it's also teaching you a little bit about color theory. So I thought this was a great way for us to listen and take note of some uses of materials. Materials you have provided for you. We will start to meet your materials, starting with colored pencil by Prismacolor. The best thing to do is to begin completing the grid on the back of your card that is titled Meet Your Materials. With each colored pencil, it's best to get sort of an idea of what the color looks like on paper, how it deals with on paper, how it feels in your hand. And most of all, in this case, it's good to sort of get an idea in a small space, how to create value with the colored pencil that you have. Now, white's a kind of funny thing. So white isn't obviously something that shows up on a white piece of paper, but it can be used to blend colors if you take more than one color. Next up, we have the general watercolor pencils. We have 2 watercolor pencil packs in your kit. This one is one that's of lower quality, but still very good. Test these out, do the same sort of gradation. Then get your watercolor pencil, your watercolor brush, and demonstrate for yourself the use of the watercolor brush. There's a couple different things you can do with watercolor. So the pigment is in the brush, the pigment is in the pencil itself. So the more pigment you lie down on the paper, the more pigment you will see. Next up is pencils. The pencils are interesting. So there is one sketch and wash pencil in your kit, and you'll be able to demonstrate that by using a watercolor brush to apply water to the pencil. The other pencils you have are 6H, 4H, 2H, and HB. HB being the hardest, 6B being the softest. Really, the color is the same. It's just the amount of pencil that comes out. And you'll be able to also create highlights using your eraser and using the blending stump to blend. So now we get to play with the Inktense watercolor pencils.
again, color in the squares, dark to light, use the watercolor pen brush to test out the saturation of the color and really how much interesting things you can do with the color, like blending. The Inktense, I believe, has more blendability. I believe it has more pigment. Lastly, we have the pan set of 36 different colors. My recommendation to you is to create an exact grid of what's on the pan to what's on the grid. So you can have sort of a reference of different colors. Really, this is an opportunity for you to really see what colors respond well, how in fact different they look on paper versus how they look on the pan themselves, dry. Obviously, you have to apply a little bit of water to the pan in order to get the watercolor to work. And in this case, what I've done is I have wet the paper beforehand, and then I've only applied watercolor on the left-hand side so that I can allow the watercolor that's coming from the pan set to bleed into the water and creating a lighter value. And as you can see, you can correct mistakes with a little bit of tissue. So when you're doing this, it's good to have a random napkin or paper towel at your side in case something gets a little too messy. So once you've taken the time to get the 36 colors outlined in your block, you will then begin to experiment with color. Obviously, these are all very different materials, and you've gotten a good sense of how to use the different materials just from filling out this grid on the back of your card that's included in your kit. Super important to realize how they vary. Now we're going to mix colors. We're going to do it with watercolor, color pencil, and the watercolor pencil. We're going to start with the watercolor pan set, starting with red, primary, which is red, yellow, and blue are the three primaries. Now, when you have a little bit of red on your brush, you can apply it to help the tertiary colors. The tertiary colors are mixed with parts of the primary color. So you'll see that now that I've applied the yellow, I'm now applying it to create the orange, and then I apply the yellow to one of the other tertiary blocks. And I will begin to mix the green and the violet with that. Super important to remember, clean brush, clean water, clean brush. It's very important to clean the reservoir that holds your water often. And you can tweak a little bit and get the color exactly you want by adding a little bit more blue or a little bit more yellow or vice versa to get the exact pigment that you want. So that's the watercolor primary and secondary colors. Primary and secondary colors. Now we're going to try it with the general colored pencil, watercolor pencil. So in this case, again, I'm completing the blocks that have the primary, and I'm lightly adding. So you want about 50% coverage, whereas the larger blocks that have the primary are about 100% color. You want about 50% color, and then you can begin to add the water using your watercolor brush. And again, clean brush between colors. You are not going to do well if you go from the blue to the yellow. You're going to make your yellow green. So keep that in mind. Clean brush. Always constantly wash your brush. If you're concerned, if it's hard to tell if your brush is clean or not, if it's clean, if it brushes onto your napkin and it comes out clean, then it's clean. So that you can also tell that you can use the watercolor pencil in a couple of different ways. You can color on the paper, or you can actually take the brush to the pencil and release the pigment that way. Lastly, we'll be doing primary to secondary color chart using the colored pencils. Same sort of general application as the watercolor pencils, but in this case, it is mainly about layering and sort of sketching these things in. You have no watercolor brush to sort of smooth things out or pick things up. This is all about just lightly laying in layers to get the color that you desire for your secondary color. Purple is typically the hardest because really there's a whole difference between cool and warm primaries. And your violet can be either a very typical looking violet, or it can look like a garnet violet. And in the case with the colored pencils, it was definitely a cool and warm combination. So they equal present. So thank you for meeting your materials with me.
You got your color lesson, and I definitely encourage you, whatever new supplies, fun supplies you might have, or supplies that you have never even opened, or even tried and true ones that you've been using for a while. The grid that you saw in that video is actually a really wonderful exercise to get to know the demands you can place upon your materials and get to really know them. So that is actually a great page to have in your garden journal. But you might be called upon to draw some things, and you might not be comfortable with that. And what I often hear people when they come into my classes, but I can't even draw a stick figure. Yeah, but can you draw a stick bug? No, that's not what I say. But I do often help people experience drawing in the way that our brains are actually fully equipped to render and draw things in a very unique way without our censorship of telling our brain that we can't do something. So this is where I'm going to ask you to bring out your materials, and that is maybe the piece of paper that you happen to have nearby, and maybe a pen. And I'm only going to take 1 minute, and I'm going to actually teach you all how to do a blind contour drawing. Now, I'm going to actually time us, but I'll tell you when to start. I just want you to get your paper and pen or pencil ready. And it doesn't even have to be a new piece of paper. Anyway, just get something ready because you're going to want to experience this. It's a lot of fun. With what's around your room, part of blind contour drawing is looking at the object. In my case, I have a spider plant in a pot over here out of view from you all. I've got a plant in a pot. Look at that object, but don't look at the paper that you are going to draw on. So don't look at the paper. You look at the object, but don't look at the paper. You don't lift your pencil or your pen through this entire process of drawing that object. And you don't stop until I say stop, because you give yourself time to actually sit with the object for a little bit. So are we ready? I know you can't answer me, so I'm just going to do it anyway. So find an object in your room, draw with your piece of paper, but remember, don't look at the piece of paper that you're drawing on, only look at the object that is in your view, and don't stop until I say stop. So minute is starting now. So the intention is to look carefully at that object and slowly render it. But remember, do not lift your pencil. Don't lift your pencil or your pen. Just draw along and see if you can let your brain guide you on exactly the drawing that you're making on this piece of paper. And take your time and look very carefully at all of the parts of the object and the little details, and try not to rush it. And if you think you're done, you're not. Give yourself some time to really look and study. All right, time is up. Well done. So if you think your drawing is funny, take a look at mine in a minute. These are steps that can help us get drawing without much concern about the quality of our skills, because really you're going to practice. We weren't born running, okay? We had to start walking at first. So these are great ways. The blind contouring technique is a great way. Tracing from magazines, if you have a garden magazine or something that you admire, I see some absolutely fantastic images on people's pictures on this Zoom. So you've got some great pictures you can pull from and just trace those things. So begin to teach your hand to operate and render shapes and things that you enjoy looking at. And another great book, I have not actually fully read the book, or I really usually never really teach from this book, but I have instructed people to read Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betsy Edwards. It is absolutely fantastic. There was a fellow that was an intern of mine, and I made him read it, and he was just blown away that he could actually draw, because he just kept saying, I'm not an artist, I don't draw, but he had great success with it. And then also, what you do on a regular basis, like stretching, exercising, walking, your brain tells you this is important. So doodle, draw, sketch, do it on a daily basis, play drawing games, test your skills. That's why having small little notebooks is a great thing. So this was my little spider plant blind contour. So if you think like yours looks worse, I doubt it. So this was the drawing that I made on the left. And then this is an excerpt from a book that I absolutely adore called Keeping a Nature Journal by Claire Walker Leslie. It is the most fun, playful, and very artistic book about wonderful ways to capture nature and the garden. And she has a great point about why blind contour drawing is important. And it allows us to loosen up. It allows us to slow down. That's the main important part. We're not going to render something perfectly right away. So your blind contour may not be your finished artwork. It'll give you a chance to study it very carefully, and then you can go back and make a more careful drawing, such as young Sam in this illustration did at age 7, and he was able to capture the two birds in different ways, one with the blind contour, and then what she calls the modified blind contour, where you go in a second time and you're able to look at the page a little bit while you're drawing, and you're able to do that. Half of the issue with people that feel like they don't know how to draw is that they're over criticizing the drawing too soon, like they're not taking time to study. So there's my drawing tip for the day. And on that note, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, that's good, because we have a lot.
Oh my, yay.
First one might be the easiest. Do you have a link to that video that you presented that you can?
Yes, I do. I actually have that on the resources. It's a PDF. That link should be live. This is what your resource page looks like. So these are all filled with links. I have a link to the playlist. And while I'm talking about links, there's also a link to a video showing you how to do a more in-depth color study that actually does have tertiary. I was jumping ahead. There's a flaw in the video. I kept saying primary and tertiary. I just skipped over secondary. And you can hear in the pause my oh no, I did that wrong. But yay for me not editing my own video. But yeah, color is a wonderful study that honestly, that would be one of your first studies in your nature journal would be on color. But yes, those videos are available.
Okey doke. There were a couple of questions and comments on what to do if you fall behind on your journaling. You have good intentions, but spotty execution. Do you have any hints on how to make yourself stay current? One person suggested what they do is they combine their garden journal with their daily journal. Another person takes photos every day, puts them in a Facebook account, and then goes back and reviews them later. Do you have any hints?
Love it. Try not to order yourself by days like that. Don't like frictionless as possible. Like sometimes, you say, oh, I can't do that because I don't have the right pen. I don't have the right tool, or it's not the right day. I mean, I can't tell you, when I teach sketching to people, I actually, in the next section, I'll share with you a trick that I also have in kind of keeping things super simple, because there are so many people with unfinished journals or unfinished sketchbooks. They start with such great intentions, and then there's like 75 blank pages afterwards. So keeping it as loose and free as possible, but I will also tell you, just start where you are. Start again. Start exactly where you are the second time. This, like I said, this isn't a book that's going to be published. This is you. This is your thing. If something else caught your attention, just start a new page with something that's captured your attention. Do warm-ups also. If you're mad that there's a little break between the pages or something, fake it out with a little warm-up in between, like a little color study or something. Like you meant to do that. So it's not so jarring to your organized sensibilities. Never let that stop you from continuing that intentional curiosity and the benefits of nature journaling. But good question.
Okay, if you don't want to spend a fortune and want just one color option, which ones would you pick?
Well, it wouldn't be one color option, it would be three. As you saw in the video, the primaries, because really, whether it be color pencil, watercolor, or a watercolor pencil, anything, having the three primaries are red, yellow, and blue. And when I teach, I do teach that there's a cool yellow, there are actually two primaries, warm and cool of each primary. But honestly, and you saw in the video, that the three primaries will get you anything you need as far as colors are concerned. But that's a great question.
Mary, if you were walking and wanted to do a field journal, what would you take with you besides your pad?
Well, I do have a couple of my little preference things, so I'm gonna do a little show and tell. This is a pack it's made for geeky chords and stuff like that. It's not really designed to be an artist's little go pack, but it works so well as a little pack. And this is not a field journal. This is more of a sketchbook, but it fits in here very nicely. This is one thing I love to take, and this is that watercolor pen, because it's a girl likes to create a little value in her life. So this helps make some dimension. So it's got water that you can keep in here, and it doesn't get wet in your bag. And you can load it, you can fill it with water when it gets empty. It has a chamber that you can fill. You can find these at any, I believe, art supply store or Michael's or hobby store. There you go. I'm sitting here doing the wrong thing. And then it's got a watercolor. So that's one thing that I definitely love to keep. The second thing, I honestly, and this is what I take on long hikes. So this is that marker
Yeah,
that isn't permanent. It's actually water soluble. So then I can actually make renderings that look like an ink wash. Is it museum quality? No. But is it my quality? Absolutely. I love these things. And then obviously a pencil, but I used ballpoint pen and everything. And I will say that pen will work on this, like on a rainy day, if you're working on this. It's got some really amazing paper. It's graph paper and line paper, but the paper is waterproof, so it will not scar. But it even says that you can't use pen on this paper if it's raining. So get yourself a good old-fashioned #2 pencil, because it'll never fail you, and a little sharpener or some sort of knife, because unsharpened can't gnaw on it to make it sharp. But yes,
okay. I'm
hope that
gonna
was
read
helpful.
this question because I'm sure you as an artist will understand it, but I don't. Any recommendations for a watercolor journal that has cold pressed paper that can handle wet, unwet well?
Yeah, I usually recommend folks use the mixed media pads because they're so wide range and they're not too expensive. In the link in the references, it's not a sketchbook with that really good watercolor paper, but it's actually a pad or loose paper. Typically, I end up, if I'm doing very intense watercolors, I'll end up putting them in. So I don't actually have the watercolor pad, because typically they aren't 3-ring bound. They're more like that you have to tear the sheet out. You have to, you know, pull it out. So it's not something that you can go from page to page. I do really recommend, this is like a mixed media notebook, and I really like when they're bound like this, because then I can open them fully and
Mhm.
use them, sitting down. I don't have to worry about flaps or anything of that nature. Strathmore makes amazing paper, but I don't know that they make a watercolor book. I know Plaza Art, if you're local to this area, they have some very beautiful journals in any variety that you need. But I typically will do the watercolor and apply it to the journal rather than having it all the watercolor paper.
Okay, thanks. There was a question about, is there any place to obtain, the kit that you showed in your video, is there a place to obtain one like that? And a corollary, which I'm not sure you would know this, is anything like that available on military bases to purchase?
The kit I actually make with the instructional guide myself for the resort that I work for, because the people, if they can't take a class, they'll pick up the kit. So I actually make those kits myself. You know, you're welcome to reach out and ask me about some of the materials maybe in them. But also I have a link on here. It's called kit.com or kit.co, and it shows you some of the stuff that would be in that kit. And you can order a lot of it from Amazon, but I didn't give the actual guts of that kit. But you can find those supplies listed on the resource page. And then obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Moving forward, we have basically, as this says, the practical application for the art of the garden journal. So this is where we get into the nitty-gritty of how fun this can be for you, going beyond the artistic level, sort of unifying the study with the art making. And in this example, this is asking the question, where's the sun? And this is an ongoing question, depending on the focus of your area of interest. You can obviously take it from different angles, but this is a great slide from a sun mapping exercise that was done for a slide presentation by one of our extension master gardeners about gardening without fear. So obviously sun's a big part of gardening. And so they actually did a wonderful little illustration on how to map out the sun. So this is what the sun looked like. They had the arrows north to south. This is a garden journal page right here, but it's just done step 75 of garden journaling, because you can do this with your own pen and paper. You can look out the window and you can see, where's the sun at 9 a.m. It's over here on the corner of my property. Where's the sun at noon? Nowhere to be seen, except for the backyard. It moved so quickly to the backyard. 3 p.m., it's all in the backyard. 6 p.m., it's only in a corner of the backyard. So this is a fantastic way to have a final result of where your sun is. Now, that's just one time of year. So it might be of interest to do a whole section in your garden journal on sun mapping throughout the year. These are examples of a camera from my own backyard of sun mapping. This was the top view was from last week. So you see nothing's going to go on in my backyard. And then this lower example is from a month earlier. So not a tremendous difference in the sun, but this is from one of those security cameras that took a picture. You can also obviously get the same results from a time lapse. If you're unable or lacking patience, you can still have a way to map the sun. This is a great way to have a huge section of your garden journal. And you can have more than one journal, by the way. It's not the tome. You can have more than one journal. And on that note, I will show you a absolute secret to getting started with a garden journal and how you can actually feel like you are a massive success with your garden journaling. And that is to start small. And when I say small, I mean a piece of paper that's folded up and turned into a miniature journal, a miniature art journal. Now, because of my background with creating the sketchbooks for the sketchbook library, and I did it for about 8 years, I did 8 years worth of sketchbooks that are part of their sketchbook library. I consider these to be an opportunity to create a narrative. So these are what are called zines. And there's a whole culture of people that are all about their zines. And in the Brooklyn Art Museum, there's current an exhibit right now on zines. So zines are basically a distilled topic, and they're individual little opportunities for you to express yourself in a very small format. The one single piece of paper, this single piece of paper, through folding it one way and then folding it another way and then folding it a third way, as shown in this diagram, is the way you can develop a little booklet. So I like to make a little booklet that I can have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So I love doing these because it makes me not get so overwhelmed with the scale of everything, right? And that this goes back to the people that might be discouraged because they started so well, but then they didn't keep that up. These little zines are not only what I would put in my pocket if I were going on a hike, and then I could sit there and say, you know, this is about my hike. I write the topic, I write the date, I write the time, I write the weather, the temperature. Are the conditions sunny? Are they cloudy? The wind? This is a great way to start your garden journal. And they're tiny, tiny little guys. And, you know, I get kind of fun with it. Look, so many seeds, but so many seeds. This is about actually the seeds during wintertime. Like there's things are, you know, seeding. This is another nature journal about the birds that happen to be out and about at that time of day. And in this case, I also did a note on the food that might be out that time of day. But the narrative basically was about the birds that I saw on my hike. And this is an example of the trail that I took at the nature center. And then that turned into a map, which then turned into sections that I could write notes. And then the end. So I love these because they're so accessible. Like you can make one today with just the views outside your window or anything of that nature. But these zines are fantastic. Now you can look up how to make these anywhere. You can take a screenshot of the directions on how to make this. They're really simple and they're very accessible and they're limitless. And then similarly, as I like to make a narrative out of my garden journal, I like to have sections that I might even start my journal and skip a few pages and start another topic of discussion in my garden journal. It doesn't have to be so, I would say it could be more fluid, you know, it could be more creative. How about that? So you can do things like you can make a page where you have the before and you draw an image of your garden and you take information before, and this could even be one day's work, right? Like let's say I'm going to go in the garden today. It's actually warm out. I'm going to go to the garden today. You can do a capture of what was before and then what you accomplished in your garden that day. Again, it's about the intention and it's about the curiosity and it's about the understanding and also the other wonderful benefits. You can have a section on just seasons where you can devote 4 pages in your journal just to the seasons. And like that image that had the photograph of the different times of year, you can begin to section things off like that. All these ideas are fantastic. What the bird planted for me. So those are things where you're like, I didn't plant that. What is that? Where'd that come from? Well, the bird brought that for you. So let's study it because we don't know what it is. Half the time we don't know what it is. It's this green thing. I didn't plant that. And then plant ID through the seasons, just color. Honestly, you can do something that has no images. It's just color. Throughout the year, there's wonderful colors that represent themselves. Be my guest, garden visitors. Maybe you can do something on tracks or on holes that are being. So the ideas that take shape. And the reason why I say take shape is because I will have an idea, like I said, the narrative, because I want to organize it, my desire to organize my information and not keep it so structured that I can't get out of the structure, that I can't keep it fluid. I think it's the artistic training that I've had. You think about the composition before you begin laying out the artwork. So that might just be my inclination, but I do want the ideas and the inspiration and the information I want to capture to take shape. But I also want to, when I say take shape, I want to show you this example, which is on a type of paper that's already got a color to it. So I'm able to add lights and darks. This is an example of using that felt pen with the water. I actually did the grid before I took the note of what I wanted to put in it. That's one way you can create a narrative. And then another way you can create a narrative in your garden, if you're not comfortable with images, is to actually use words and type, which is kind of fun. And you can make art through using words. These are ideas and how to practically apply your study. This is an image that was used in the slideshow, but this is basically what I was studying that day. And these are mushed up berries. I wanted to see what they look like. And so those are actual live samples on the page. And then these were going to be bubbles where I illustrated the samples of the berries. And obviously that's a honeysuckle. And so one of the honeysuckle berries was smushed over there. So you can format your page and have these ideas take shape. Another wonderful way to structure your garden journal and apply what you're doing is to just take pictures and use them later. These were photographs taken from the organic vegetable garden that we have here, our demo garden. And this is actually 1 day's worth of harvest at the organic vegetable garden. Are you not blown away by the colors and the shapes? This would absolutely be all about the celebration of what this garden produced and the just absolute stunning beauty of all of these vegetables and shapes. Honestly, don't get too caught up in how the book is. Just turn the page and keep moving. Turn the page and keep moving. And so, with what we've talked about today, you should be able to create a garden journal with ease and delight, and especially curiosity. So, I hope that this has inspired you and also taken away some of the fear related to garden journaling. I appreciate your time. So, any questions?
Well, I just want to say that I agree with what you said, and some people have commented that this was a wonderful and joyous presentation, which I would second. We have no more questions, so I think we fold our tents. This has just been wonderful and so kind of off the beaten path. I've really enjoyed it. And I really thank you, Mary.
Oh, thank you, Colleen. It has been an absolute delight. And I know that all the programs that are offered are great. And I would encourage you to maybe journal while listening to some of these programs in the future. I do thank everybody for your time.